and the potential impacts of India's involvement in that murder. Shameful.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to rise virtually this evening to pursue a question I initially asked on May 8th of this year, 2023. That question related to electoral reform, and specifically, I was picking up on the fact that just in the previous weekend at the Liberal Party Policy Convention, Liberals had adopted a resolution very close to a motion that had been put forward by my Green colleague, the Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre, and now the NDP as well, another motion put forward very similar from the Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith, calling for a citizens' assembly. So the Liberal Party gathered in Ottawa and voted for holding a citizens' assembly to investigate electoral reform. The Prime Minister's initial response to the media was that there was no consensus, his language, to pursue a citizens' assembly on electoral reform. When the Honourable Minister for Democratic Institutions and Member of Parliament for Beauséjour responded to me on that day back in May, he reiterated this notion that there wasn't consensus for a citizens' assembly. So let's just frame tonight's debate around this central point. And I do want to stop and thank the grassroots campaigners who are nonpartisan citizen activists in Fair Vote Canada for pursuing this matter and demonstrating the majority of Canadians want to see a citizens' assembly. To say there's no consensus around getting rid of first past the post, as Prime Minister says, I think that's debatable, but it is a move to a different voting system. But to say there's no consensus and therefore we won't pursue a method to find consensus is absurd. The Citizens' Assembly, a nonpartisan Citizens' Assembly on electoral reform, is for the very purpose of finding consensus, bringing Canadians together who are chosen randomly. Citizens' assemblies are a really fascinating tool in democracies. Canada has used them on this topic, but only at the provincial level. There's great support for moving to a Citizens' Assembly on electoral reform. By the way, Madam Speaker, 8 times since 1921, this House or various law commissions have studied first past the post, and in every instance since 1921, nobody pulled together, nobody as in a group of people, a House of Commons committee, and so on, have never found that first past the post is an appropriate system for Canada. And that's because ever since the early 1920s, we have not been a two-party system. We've had 3, 4, and now in this House, 5 parties. And therefore, in an electoral system with a first past the post system, inevitably, invariably, the vote is distorted between the popular vote and the seat count. We have always had, especially as I said, since 1921, every authority that has studied the matter has said first past the post doesn't work for Canada. But to find the new system, to develop that consensus, a citizens' assembly is an excellent tool. And I found it bizarre to be told in question period that we didn't have consensus on the tool to find consensus. And I note parenthetically, Madam Speaker, that it appears to me that the Prime Minister will not think there's consensus on anything until everyone agrees with him. And that is not a tool for consensus. We absolutely must have fair voting so that Canadians have confidence that the way they cast their vote has an impact on the result. With that, Madam Speaker, I'll turn it to the Parliamentary Secretary for her response. Thank you.
Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her speech. I know she's incredibly passionate about this topic, and I do enjoy listening to her, and I take her feedback very seriously. I also wish her well so that she can be with us here together. Madam Speaker, we are committed to strengthening Canada's democratic institutions, our electoral system, the fundamental rules determining how votes are translated into the seats in the House of Commons is one of the most foundational pieces of our democracy. Among many things, it provides Canadians with a direct connection to their members of parliament who must work with each other to develop national policy and make political decisions while engaging and remaining accountable to their constituents in an increasingly digital and connected Canada. Our current first-past-the-post system is not perfect, as the member acknowledges and raises crucial points, but no system is. It has served Canada well for over 150 years and continues to advance the democratic values that Canadians want reflected in their system of government. This includes strong local representation, stability, and accountability. How Canadians vote and how we govern ourselves is fundamentally important and impacts us all. Given this, the government's view has been very clear. Any major reforms to the electoral system should not be made without the broad support of Canadians. We consulted very broadly with Canadians, and a clear preference for a new electoral system, let alone a consensus, did not emerge. Therefore, the government decided not to proceed. However, the government has continued to work to improve Canada's federal electoral process. Notably, in 2018, the government introduced the Elections Modernization Act, which represented a significant reform of the Canada Elections Act. Parliament passed this important legislation, which modernized the electoral process, making it easier for Canadians to participate in elections and further bolstering Canadians' trust and confidence in Canada's world-class and independently administered electoral system. For example, Madam Speaker, these changes made the federal electoral process more accessible by reducing barriers for persons with all types of disabilities, Canadians living abroad, and Canadian Armed Forces members so they can vote and participate more fully in the electoral process. It has also made it easier for Canadians to vote by giving the Chief Electoral Officer additional flexibility to run elections more efficiently, reducing wait times, as well as extending the hours for advanced polls and the use of mobile polls to better serve remote and isolated communities. Madam Speaker, I'd also note that the supply and confidence agreements established in March 2022 between the leader of the NDP and the Prime Minister included several commitments aimed at maintaining the health of Canada's democracy and removing potential barriers to voting and participation. We will continue to work with Elections Canada to explore ways to expand the ability for people to vote, including improving the process of mail-in ballots. These are just some of the important issues that the government is focused on to deliver for Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member Saanich Gulf Islands. Oh, the honourable member doesn't have her mic on. Still not on.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. May I begin again?
Yes.
Thank you. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary made the claim that First Past the Post has served Canada well. I had the honour to serve on the all-party select committee that studied the matter of electoral reform, and we heard from many experts that First Past the Post does not serve Canada well, including former Chief Electoral Officer Jean-Pierre Kingsley and Professor Emeritus Peter Russell, among many experts. First Past the Post distorts results and it leaves frustrated, unhappy voters. But when we say we're committed to strengthening democracy, I would urge the Parliamentary Secretary to reflect on contributing to public cynicism and how that hurt Canada's democracy. When the Liberals left from third place to win a majority in 2015, it was largely because they promised 2015 would be the last election under First Past the Post. I note they've resurrected the 2015 election promise to get rid of GST on rentals. Time to bring back the 2015 election promise to fix our voting system.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And once again, I appreciate my colleagues' input. I can say that even during that time when Canadians were being consulted, I too held consultations in my own riding. And even at those meetings, it was very difficult as everybody has very different opinions and are passionate about what is the best electoral process for Canada. And as I stated in my earlier remarks, the government felt very strongly that unless we had widespread consensus, that changing such a significant tool of our democracy would not be able to move forward. But in my last remaining seconds, Madam Speaker, I will say we are deeply committed to making the electoral process better and fair. And I know the PROC committee is also looking at this, and we welcome additional comments and conversations on how we can make improvements to our electoral system.
The honourable for Spadina, Fort York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On June 9, 2023, I asked the Minister of Immigration